Hey guys, welcome back to True Crime Wife by Jess. I'm your host, Jess Milliken. This podcast focuses on female offenders, the crimes they commit, the why behind it, and every other episode I focus on cases of missing women or women who have been the victims of homicides that are unsolved, those cold cases that haunt us. This is a space where we talk about real cases, real people, and families who are still waiting for answers. Today's case is another one that feels like it should have been solved. It happened during the day on a busy street, and yet no one saw anything. No one has stepped forward, and now, almost 40 years later, we still don't have answers. This is the unsolved homicide of Beverly Potter-Mintz. Leland, North Carolina is a small community, nestled next to the beach town of Wilmington. And in 1987, there wasn't a lot going on. Not a lot of crime, and the community could safely be described as quiet. All of that changed in 1987. In February of that year, 23-year-old Beverly Potter-Mintz, who was known as Jaye by her friends and family, was living her life in this small town. She was raising two little boys, Andrew and BJ. Andrew was almost 2 years old and BJ was 4. Her husband, William Mintz, was in the U.S. Army and was stationed in Germany. Jaye is described by her family as being a kind-hearted, good person who loved her kids. She loved those two little boys. She loved horses and horseback riding, which kudos to her because horses terrify me. Her cousin, Renee Braswell, said that people would always ask her why Jaye was so quiet. But Jaye was not quiet when you got to know her. Renee joked that she and Jaye, whom she was very close with, would talk for hours. And it was not uncommon for Jaye to be the one talking her ear off. Jaye sounds like my type of people. Now, in February 1987, Jaye had put an advertisement in the newspaper, the Morning Star, to sell a waterbed that she had, which is very 80s. I hear waterbed, I immediately think 80s. So she's trying to sell a waterbed. The newspaper was offering a promotion where you could run an ad for free, so she took advantage. When she didn't sell it and the ad expired, she put in a second ad, but this time used her mother's phone number, since she'd already done one with using her own phone number. Now, on February 23rd of that year, 1987, Jaye was home with her son, Andrew, putting together a birthday party for him. He was just about to turn 2, so not quite 2 yet, but very close. Her other son, BJ, was at his paternal grandmother's home. At 9:40 a.m., Jaye received a phone call from her mother, Lorene Potter, who said that she just received a phone call from a man who was interested in purchasing the waterbed. Lorene provided directions to the man to Jaye's house and was calling Jaye just to, let her know that this guy was going to show up and he wanted to look at the waterbed. Jaye told her mom that she'd already sold the waterbed. Lorene hadn't taken down the man's information, so she told Jaye to let the man know when he arrived that she'd already sold it. Don't let him go see it or anything like that. It's already been sold, so he send him on his way, basically. And this would be the last time that anyone spoke with Jaye. Now, Lorene arrived at Jaye's home around noon that day. So remember, she talked to Jaye at 9:40 a.m., and now it's just around noon, and she's at her house. And she immediately noticed that something was off when she went to the door because it was unlocked. Jaye was not someone who ever left her door unlocked. As she entered the home, she could hear her grandson, Andrew, crying in another room. So she made her way to the back bedroom. And this is where things get really horrifying because Lorene found her grandson and she found Jaye. Jaye was on the waterbed. She had been bound and stabbed. Andrew, who was crying, was not physically harmed, but he kept on saying a bad man hurt mommy and made mommy cry. A bad man hurt mommy. One article I found also reported that Andrew Once he was, investigators talked to him. I mean, he's not even 2 years old. He can't give much information. I mean, if you're familiar with almost 2-year-olds or 2-year-olds in general, they're not very descriptive. But he was at least able to identify it was a white man who hurt his mom. Investigators would later find out that Jaye was not only bound and stabbed, but she had also been sexually assaulted and her throat had been slashed. This all happened in a very short period of time, between 9:40 a.m. when Lorene had last spoken with Jaye and noontime when Lorene arrived at the home. Again, a very small window of time that this happened. Now, investigators from the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene, and they found a newspaper clipping for the Waterbed ad in the home. And the Waterbed ad itself on that clipping had been circled. So it's believed that whomever arrived at the home and killed Jaye left that there. And with that piece of evidence in mind, investigators also believe that the man who called Jaye's mother about the waterbed was most likely the killer. The problem is that man has never stepped forward. And honestly, why would he? He's probably the one who did it. So we have a suspect, but we just don't know who he is or what he looks like or where he is or anything. Attempts were made to trace the call or to try to trace the call that from Lorene's phone, but the technology back then wasn't great. So it proved impossible. They tried, but it didn't, there was no positive results from that. So, okay. So the technology wasn't great back then. We know that it was the 80s, but what about witnesses? It was broad daylight when this happened, between 9:40 a.m. and noontime. That is in the middle of the day, early morning. People are out and about, but no witnesses have stepped forward reporting that they saw anything that day. Whoever this guy was, he was able to enter the home and leave essentially undetected. He just blended in and disappeared. Okay, so whenever there is a homicide, investigators, they're going to look at they're looking at the victim and their life and, was there anything going on in the victim's life? Anything weird prior to this happening that could have precipitated these events? Or, was there like a buildup? Well, Jaye's sister, Jill Watts, told Dateline that Jaye and her husband had recently separated. He was stationed in Germany at the time of Jaye's murder, so he is not the suspect. So don't be. We all always say it's always the husband. It was not the husband. He was not even in the country. Jaye had also just gotten a job as a waitress. She was working at a Hong Kong type restaurant in the area, and she'd been dating. I couldn't find any information on whether she had any serious relationships ongoing or if it was just casual dating, but a relative of Jaye's did reach out to me to tell me that Jaye had been working at a Hong Kong type restaurant in the area prior to her death and that they believed that she was dating the manager. According to this relative, some of the family were suspicious of him, but I wasn't able to find any information on whether that man was ever looked into by the police. Shortly after Jaye's death, that same man disappeared, possibly returning to his home country. I don't think he was from here. So I'm not sure that guy would have been the one, but, if someone's dating someone and then that person dies and then the other guy disappears and leaves the country or something, that is a little bit shady and maybe something that should have been looked into. But again, maybe it was, and the police just didn't put that out there for the public, which is possible. Now, on the day of Jaye's murder, Jaye's sister, Jill, was on her way to Jaye's. Jill lived in Colorado at the time, and she was driving to North Carolina for Andrew's birthday party. Jill didn't find out what had happened to Jaye until she arrived later that day. I can't even imagine. She showed up to that house. It's crawling with police officers. She's thinking that she's there to celebrate a happy day. It's Andrew's birthday. And instead, she's finding out that her sister has been brutally murdered. I can't even imagine that. A few months before Jaye's murder, Jaye's cousin Angela and her daughter had moved in with Jaye. And Angela reported to Dateline that Jaye had been getting some unwanted attention around that time. There were some admirers. Now, Jaye is a very pretty girl. She's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Now, there was actually a man who apparently wrote "I love you, Jaye" on the driveway one day. And Jaye, she was such a kind person. She just didn't say anything to them. She's just like, "Oh, thank you." You know, that's just the type of person that she was. She was just very kind. So even though she didn't want this attention, she wasn't gonna like tell them to go away and leave her alone or anything. She was kind. So she's like, "Oh, thank you. You know, take the compliments." Now, Angela said that Jaye had been getting some weird calls. And these calls started after she had posted the initial ad for the waterbed. So remember, that first ad that Jaye put in the newspaper had her own phone number on it. So when she put that ad in the newspaper, she started getting phone calls to the house. And they were weird calls, harassing calls, people calling and taunting her and Angela. And they were making sexual comments. Now, that's important to know because I only found that in one article, and this relative that had reached out to me told me that it's something that very rarely gets spoken about. It's almost like I don't know if like it's being omitted on purpose, but there's not a lot of information out there about that piece of information, that she was getting weird phone calls and harassing phone calls prior to her death. Now, a week before Jaye was murdered, Angela told Dateline about something that had stuck out to her, something that had happened. She had walked by Jaye's bedroom and noticed that Jaye was crying. She asked Jaye what was wrong, and Jaye told her that she'd had a dream about a strange man that was going to kill her. That is either some very like crazy subconscious warning, maybe based on like the phone calls that she was getting, or maybe there was something else going on. She didn't say anything else to Angela about it. She just left it at, "I just had this dream." So I'm kind of curious, like, was there something else going on that Jaye wasn't talking about? You know, was she having issues with someone? Had something escalated? Or was it just because of those phone calls? I mean, that's pretty scary to be getting a bunch of phone calls like that. And, you know, we don't know if it was one individual making those calls, if it was multiple people. You know, caller ID wasn't a thing back then. So now this all happened in 1987. And obviously we're talking about it now in 2026, and there's still no resolution. An article published by Star News in 2021 states that there is information that there may have been a car seen leaving the scene, but lead investigator Lieutenant Israel West said that releasing details like that could hinder the case. So we don't know if there actually was a car seen leaving the scene. And if there was, we don't know what it looked like. And the police are not going to give us that information. And, you know, it's been a really long time. I'm sure that car is not actually around anymore, but it might be good if that is the case for people to know, so that they can be like, "Oh, I remember seeing that car. This was the person driving it." Maybe an important piece of information at this point that people should know about. But so I'm just going to say that if you're ever around like where a crime happens, even if you think, "Oh, I didn't see anything," you might have seen something. So just go and tell the police and be like, "I was in the area and these are the things that I saw." Because maybe there's that one little detail that you don't think is important, or it seemed like a totally normal thing that is going to connect to something that they already know. And they're going to be like, "Okay, this is actually really helpful to us." And it could break the case wide open. So if you see something, even if you don't think it's important, definitely say something. Don't keep it to yourself. Don't keep secrets. Don't be shady, guys. Jaye's case has gone unsolved, but her family has not given up. The family hired a criminal investigator, Dr. Maurice Godwin, out of Fayetteville, to look into the case. So in 2014, Brunswick County Sheriff's Office and the District Attorney's Office allowed Dr. Godwin to have access to Jaye's case files. So this was 12 years ago. So 12 years ago, he gets access to all of this information in these case files. Now, Dr. Godwin, he's worked on hundreds of cold cases around the country. So this was an opportunity for another set of eyes on the case by someone with experience dealing with cold cases specifically. Now, as Dr. Godwin looked into the case file, which was 22,000 pages long, that's a lot of case file. Just saying. He discovered that the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office didn't attempt to get Jaye's phone records, despite knowing that someone had been calling her house in the days leading up to her deaths. So that's, again, it was happening. She was getting these phone calls. It was reported by Angela and the family, and there were no phone records ever gathered, and I don't even know how long those were kept by phone companies back then, or if it was even possible to get that, or if it even would have been helpful. But he discovered, going through these 22,000 pages, that was never looked into. Now, Godwin also discovered that the man who lived next to Jaye had easy access to her back door and had not been interviewed. He was finally interviewed in 2018 by Godwin, but he had been at work the day of the murder, so he had a very solid alibi. His wife was home, but reportedly did not hear anything or see anything. And why is the back door of the house so important? Because it is believed that that is how the suspect went in and out of the home. Or at least that's how they left the home. There was actually a drop of blood found on the linoleum near the back door, which is why it's pretty clear that most likely the suspect left the house that direction, which could be why nobody saw the person leaving. The fact that whoever did this went in, or possibly went in the back door, though, that's pretty telling. But even if they just left out the back door, that says a lot to me as well. Anyway, nobody knows what happened, but something happened, and this guy attacked her and did these horrible things to her and then left out the back door. Or maybe he went through the back door to begin with, which is also very shady. Who does that? Nobody. If you're going to go buy something from someone, don't go through the back door. Because the neighbor had easy access to the back door, he should have been interviewed long before Dr. Godwin got involved, and he hadn't been. Even if he was at work, the police didn't know he was at work, right? You have to have conversations and look into that to know that somebody was at work during a crime. I mean, that's part of the investigation. So anyway, to me, the guy that went to buy that waterbed, he is still suspect numero uno in my mind. There's just so much shadiness with that guy. And again, to me, it seems like this was pretty premeditated. Whoever did this, I really do feel like it was the guy that wanted to buy the waterbed. And I think that when he got there, he knew what he was going there for. It was not for the waterbed. I don't believe that even for a second. I think that he had done this before, or he knew that he wanted to do this. This seemed very, very premeditated. I'd love to hear from you guys and what you guys think. But anyway, so Dr. Godwin, he's going through these 22,000 pages of case files. And so in 2021, so he started working on this in 2014. It's now 2021, and he's actively working on this case. He tells the Star News in 2021 that he doesn't know if Jaye's nails were ever scraped for DNA. The DNA that investigators uncovered at the scene back in 1987 were from the vaginal area, the pillows, and the sheets. There's no record that he saw that said anything about the nails being checked for DNA. Dr. Godwin was going to pay on his own for a DNA test to use the DNA obtained from the scene for facial recognition and to try to trace genealogy, to try to get some sort of a hit. The Star News article that I read said that Godwin told them that the sheriff's office thought that he was asking too much at that point, and so he was subsequently removed from the case. So as of 2021, he no longer was allowed access to the case files, and supposedly that was triggered because he wanted to have the DNA tested on his own. He was going to pay for it, and they were like, no, thank you. Not really sure what that's about, but that's what was reported as having happened. So one interesting piece of information that Godwin did get from reviewing the case is that whoever this man was, he may have had some boating experience. So that's an interesting detail. The rope that was used to bind Jaye's hands was tied in the same way that you tie a boat to get, or that you would tie it was tied in the same way that you would tie a boat to a dock. Not something that everyone has the knowledge or skill to do. I know, I don't even know what that type of a knot would even look like. So we do at least know at this point, from putting all of this together, that it was a white male, most likely the person that called to get directions to her house because they wanted to look at the waterbed, supposedly. It was a white man, wanted the waterbed, might have boating experience, and at least exited through the back door. And there may have been a car seen leaving the scene, but again, there's only like one reference to that, and I have no clue what that vehicle even would have looked like, and they've never released that information. So Brunswick County Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant West said in 2021, also reported by Star News. Star News has done a lot of coverage of this case, so that's where I was able to get a lot of information about this case. They've been very proactive over the past 40 years and keeping this case alive. And I don't know if that's the family reaching out to them or them just remembering, hey, this is still unsolved. Let's talk to the family. Let's see what the update is from the police. But either way, lots of good information out there from them. So over the years, that the Sheriff's Department has received calls from across the country about this case. In 2000, Jaye's case was featured on the front page of USA Today, which led to the case gaining some national attention. And there were some potential leads at that time, but those were investigated and did not lead to the killer. In February 2021, Dateline did an episode on the case, and that also has really good information. They did interviews with the family, and that led to further calls to the sheriff's office. But again, nothing that has led to a suspect. There were departments who were reaching out to the sheriff's office, essentially saying that they'd had similar incidents in their towns, and they also couldn't find out who did it. So, true crime brain immediately going haywire over here, thinking, oh, maybe it's a serial killer. And honestly, the horrificness of this case and what Jaye went through, this doesn't sound like somebody who was killing for the first time ever. And if they were, I can't imagine that was the only time that they did this. Hopefully someday we'll find out exactly who did this and what happened and why. Now, even though Dr. Godwin wasn't able to get the DNA evidence sent out for testing, the sheriff's office did report that they sent DNA evidence for processing back around that same time. But to date, nothing has ever been released by them regarding the findings or if there even were any findings. So either there are results and they have a lead, or they're choosing not to tell the public or the family, or the DNA results were inconclusive, which does happen. Either way, there have been no updates since they initially reported that they would be sending the finding or the results out for testing. This case is one that is known by many of the residents in Leland. Her family has certainly never forgotten her. Unfortunately, some of her closest family members will never see justice for her. And so her mother, Lorene, and I feel bad for her mom because, her mom gave that guy directions to the house. So if it was him, I'm sure that she has lived with that guilt for a very, very long time, thinking that it's her fault. And it's not her fault. We can't predict that these things are going to happen. And in 1987, classified ads, that's how you sold things. You had random people showing up at your house all the time to buy things. That wasn't unheard of. Nobody was thinking, oh, are they going to murder me? No, that wasn't a thing. But anyway, Lorene passed away in 2007. So she'll never see justice for her daughter. And Jaye's son, Andrew, you guys remember Andrew, he's the almost 2-year-old who was the only witness to his mother's murder. He passed away unexpectedly at the age of 39 in 2024. From what I could gather, his passing was due to some sort of medical event, and he left behind his wife, Billy Potter, and 2 children, Trent and Beverly. And yes, I don't know this for sure, but I believe Beverly was most likely named after his mother, which is a great way to honor his mom. And I absolutely love that. When I saw her name, I was like, Andrew, kudos. I'm going to include the GoFundMe page for Andrew's family because there is one up from when he passed away a couple of years ago. And like I said, it does not seem like this was an expected thing. It came on very suddenly and quickly, and he passed. And it left Billy and the kids alone, and I'm sure that they could still use the help with that unexpected passing of their father. So that will be posted in the info section for the show, as well as on my Facebook page, The True Crime Wife by Jess. Now, across the board, this case is just sad. Jaye was killed in broad daylight. She was inside, but it was broad daylight. It was between 9:40 a.m. and noontime on a road that often had people out and about, and no one saw anything. Her son, who was there and luckily unharmed, was too young to remember anything or provide information about who had done this. And now, almost 40 years later, he's no longer alive to see justice for his mother. Jaye's own mother also passed, never knowing exactly what happened or who did this to her daughter. There is a Facebook page for Jaye, Justice for Jaye, and that's Jaye. Please go find that page, follow it, and support the family in spreading the word about Jaye's case. I've included a link to that in the description for this podcast episode as well. And additionally, please share this podcast episode out or the Facebook post that I put on my page so that more people will learn Jaye's name, know what happened to her, and maybe together we can help find Jaye's killer, because she deserves that and the family deserves it. Jaye was a wonderful young woman whose life was taken from her, and she left behind 2 sons who never got to grow up with their mom. One of those sons will never know what happened to his mom or why it happened or who did it. And her own mother will also never see justice brought to her daughter. If you know anything, no matter how small, like I said earlier, even if it doesn't seem important, it could be important. So please come forward. Someone out there saw something that day, or they know something. All it takes is one small detail to break the case wide open and get justice for Beverly Mintz Potter, also known as Jaye. If you have any information, please contact the Brunswick County Sheriff's Office. Their phone number is 910-253-2777. Even the smallest detail could change everything. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of True Crime Wife by Jess. Please take a second to leave a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast grow. And more importantly, it helps stories like Jaye's reach more people. I also truly love reading your feedback so I can keep improving and bringing you the kind of content that matters. If you have a case that you want to see covered, email me at truecrimewifebyjess@gmail.com. If you want more information about Jaye's case, head over to my Facebook page, The True Crime Wife by Jess, where I'll be posting additional details and updates. You can also catch updates about the podcast from that page as well. Finally, as always, cases like this matter. Awareness matters. Sharing matters. Someone knows something. Someone saw something. And someday, we hope they say something. This is Jess, and I'll see you in the next episode.